Imagine a room full of people that are represented by these black dots are divided into groups of unequal size. These groups have a decision to make, and to decide, each group will get 2 votes, no matter how big their population. This group with 39 people gets just 2 votes. These groups with just 1 person each still get 2 votes each. But one group gets no votes at all. This may sound unfair, but this example is shockingly similar to a system that is ingrained into our country's constitution, the U.S. Senate. These groups represent actual American states, and each dot represents 1 million people. California, with over 39 million people, has 39 dots. And while in our original simulation, Wyoming had 1 dot, that's not actually quite right. Wyoming only has roughly 570,000 residents, so it really only needs about half of a dot. Yet both of these states get 2 senators, meaning the people of Wyoming have 68 times the voting power of the people of California. Oh, and remember that group from the beginning of the video with no votes? That's DC, which despite having a larger population than both Vermont and Wyoming, has no representation in Congress at all. And because less populous states, like Wyoming and Vermont, tend to be predominantly white, and larger states like California and Florida tend to have higher percentages of people of color, the Senate gives white voters a disproportionate amount of power. For example, the US is 13% black, yet black Americans have just 7% of the voting power to elect the Senate. Hispanic Americans represent 18% of the total population and have just 3% of the voting power to elect the Senate. Asian Americans represent 6% of the US and have just 2% of the voting power to elect the Senate. Meanwhile, white Americans are 60% of the population, but reflect 82% of the voting power to elect the Senate. Even when the numbers are adjusted for the registered voting population, the voting power of people of color is still cut in half. And it may come as no surprise that giving white voters more power has led to Republican advantages as well. Current Democrat sitting senators received 11 million more votes than current Republican sitting senators. Yet Republicans hold 53 Senate seats, while Democrats hold just 47. These Republican advantages in the Senate, combined with Republican advantages in the Electoral College, have led to minority rule in our country. A minority-elected Senate blocked Obama from appointing a Supreme Court judge. Then, a minority-elected president appointed a judge who was consequently confirmed by another minority-elected Senate. If every American's vote had counted equally, Democrats would be in power of every branch of the US government. Instead, Trump is raiding immigrant homes, cutting taxes on the rich, holding back our economy with useless trade wars, and is unable to take on basic presidential duties, like protecting Americans during a global pandemic. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court is restricting voting rights, failing to fight gerrymandering, and stripping migrants of their basic rights. Some may argue that changing the Senate would harm rural voters, but only in the same way that white people are harmed by loss of white privilege. When you have an advantage, a level playing field feels unfair. Altogether, the Senate is an undemocratic institution that is unjustly giving power to a political party that is further undermining our democracy. Americans should demand better. It's time to abolish the Senate as we know it and replace it with a much more just institution.